majority of the time we think it's all in our head, but a lot of anxiety is in our body. And that's what nervous system regulation is. It's showing your body that you are safe and that you are calm. And that's the most important thing to do when you're feeling anxious.
Hey there, lady. My name is Molly Conley, and I'm devoted to helping women reinvent their love lives, whether that's after divorce, dating on and off the apps, or in their committed relationship. Why? Because I've been there. I'm a former college athlete who filed for divorce 3 years into marriage, swam in the online dating pool into my late 30s, and now I am married to the man of my spreadsheet dreams who I met 4 months before the world shut down. As a dating and relationship coach, I help my clients shift the focus from being obsessed with finding Mr. Right to shifting to herself as Miss Right Now. We build a foundation filled with clarity, connection, and confidence, knowing she is worth waiting for. Each week on the podcast, I'll bring you love life insights and savvy guests, where you will receive the courage to release programmed limiting beliefs. Discover patterns and behaviors restricting you from finding and attracting quality men, and ways to choose yourself first so you can build a foundation for a healthy relationship with yourself and a partner. I'm excited to announce that registration is open for April's masterclass. It's called Looking for Love. Gain the clarity you are looking for in your love life. I'm going to be covering quite a few topics, including figuring out what you want in a man and in a relationship, plus why you want those things, having an understanding of what might be getting in your way from finding this man and having your ideal relationship. Plus, I'm going to share ways for you to build self-trust to know if someone is right for you right now. This class is going to be recorded and it's sent out to all of those who register. So even if you cannot make it live, don't worry. You get to watch the replay. Also, if you do join live, you might be one of the lucky few that gets to join me for on-the-spot coaching. So go to the show notes, get all the details, and lock in your spot by registering today. I'm excited to have Maria Ganowski joining me on the podcast today. She helps anxious millennials self-heal their anxiety through mindset, movement, and ugly self-care. We met last November in a mini mind and have kept in touch as well as celebrate each other's wins. So welcome to the show, lady.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. This is something that I was so excited. Like when I first decided to start this podcast, I was like, I know I want to have Maria on. And when I polled my audience about a few different topics that they would love to hear about, let alone maybe have a guest on, this was an area that even a past client was like, please bring an anxiety and dating expert or someone that knows about anxiety and how it affects her life. And I was like, perfect. I actually have someone that I could chat with. So
yeah, that's cool.
Super pumped to have you here. So tell the ladies a little bit more about you.
Yeah, so I am a self-healing, self-development mentor, mainly around mindset for women with anxiety. And I dealt with anxiety myself, daily anxiety for years. And I went on my own self-care journey, and I realized that along the way, healing requires a lot more than just talk therapy, right? Like I was in therapy myself and I was noticing some changes, but the biggest change happened in my life and in me when I started doing the work myself outside of my therapist's office, like in my own life. So now I teach millennial women how to use tools like mindset shifting, nervous system regulation, and just daily lifestyle changes that they can make to gain a sense of control over their anxiety, and in doing so, their entire life again.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I think a lot of women do struggle with like a variety of anxious moments throughout their life and their day, especially like during transitions. So can you talk a little bit more about how you got started specifically working with millennials with anxiety? I know you said like you were doing it for yourself, but like when were you like, this is what I want to do to help other women or help other millennials?
Yeah. So I got to this point and I don't know what sparked it, but I just had this moment of like, who the hell am I? Like, I don't consider myself an anxious person anymore. Like, I don't remember the last time I was like consistently struggling.
Mm.
And it was that moment where I kind of realized how powerful all the work that I was doing was. And I it was just so often where I was hearing from friends or from family members or on social media, specifically millennials talking about anxiety or joking about their anxiety, or, the self-deprecating humor about anxiety, and like all this talk about how anxiety is horrible, how anxiety sucks, how people are fighting anxiety, how it's such a struggle. And I was like, I know the answers. Like, I need to help these people. Like, I've done it myself. And so yeah, my sister was in the coaching space, and I had at this point worked with tons of coaches in a lot of different areas, in mindset and communication, business coaches, yeah, manifestation, all different coaches. So I was very familiar with the space. And so I started with just an Instagram. And then I just started sharing tips and value and things like that. And people were resonating with it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to make this official. I'm going to register my LLC and make this a coaching business. And I just started from the Instagram and then started creating some offers. And yeah, that's how I got into it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Especially when it's like the people around you are not only like speaking the language that you're like, oh, I know I can help you, not like fix
Yeah.
you, but like help you
Yeah.
get over something.
Yeah.
It's always one of those moments like, would you pay for it? Would
Yeah.
you? And most of the time they're like, well, and then eventually when they hear all the value that you're giving, they're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I definitely need this for myself.
Yeah.
So now when we think about it, with having your own experience, and let's say it's like the relationship with anxiety, how does dating anxiety look like? Whether that's like the physical symptoms or the anxious thoughts, or all combined?
Yeah, so it really depends on the person. I always say this in my content and with my clients. Everyone is different. So anxiety could show up in a lot of different ways. Mainly, it's how you feel in your body, right? Some people
Mhm.
it's like biting their nails. Some people it's like fidgeting with their hair. Some people it's like way worse. It's like their chest feels really tight or they have migraines, right? Like things like that. As far as like thoughts with dating, it could be like, I'm not good enough.
Mm.
What if they don't like the way that I look? What if I sound weird? What if I am clumsy? Right? Like all these like different thoughts that like, yeah, some of that can happen, but it shouldn't be holding you back as much as it does for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think about how that is almost just like pattern thoughts that just become, how do I even put it? It's just becomes end up being like almost a habit every time
Hmm.
then when you go out on a date. So you kind of gave some really good examples, but how would we want to break that down? Like with how dating anxiety would look like before a date, and then during a date, and after a date, so that women can definitely pinpoint that it's not like it's just me sort of thoughts or feelings or even symptoms. So they don't feel, alone, and can even start thinking about, being aware of their anxiety during dating.
Yeah, a lot of times before a date, you're talking about like physical symptoms or like,
Well, like a combination, like, so even I'm thinking about me pre-dating, I would sweat a lot, like when I was on a date.
yeah,
So for me, like, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to buy a lot of deodorant. I'm like, that never fixed anything. So I was like, I'm just
yeah,
going to wear black.
yeah,
So I had a lot
yeah,
of black in my wardrobe to try to
yeah.
mask the nervousness. But it's like,
Mm,
no, I needed to address my anxiety. And at the time I really didn't. So it's kind of like
yeah.
figuring out all of the mixture of those things.
Yeah, I would become aware of like what your patterns are, because like a lot of times we don't realize like that it's something that we do have power over until we
Mm.
recognize like, oh, this is something that I'm continuously doing. And maybe if I get out of this pattern, I can kind of get rid of that symptom at least like
Mm.
before going on a date. But like you said, sweating is very normal. Having shallow breaths, like being nervous, like to speak
Oh, wow.
in front
I
of
didn't.
someone new, especially on a first date. Um, Even like your heart pounding. You're like kind of in the state of
Mm.
like, what's going to happen, like freaking out just because it's the unknown, you know? Um, but yeah, those types of things show up for a lot of people, especially for a first date, because it's this idea of the unknown and someone new. And a lot of this too is coming from past situations, which
Mm.
I focus on a lot in my content. And a lot of people don't realize that anxiety is coming from an experience from the past that left you in the state of fight or flight, the state of like nervousness, the state where your body is basically telling you that you don't feel safe. And so it's your job to figure out, how do I feel safe again? And the way to do that mainly is through your body. So things like, well, we'll get into tips later, but like, you know, when you're having when you are sweating, asking yourself, okay, instead of like covering this up with deodorant, like what can I do to stop sweating? Why do I think I'm sweating? Like what is it that I'm nervous about? Right? Like
Right.
how can I like rethink that? Or how can I make myself feel a little more safe about that situation that's causing me this, you know, feeling of um tenseness or, you know, nervousness or whatever it is.
Yeah. So you gave some really good examples of that, like the before and the after, or before and during. Like, what are some examples? So like, let's say a woman just like, she goes for it, and let's just be honest, like most of the time, like drinking covers up the nervousness. Like it helps us give
Yeah.
like, liquid courage to the
Yeah.
moment. But like the after dating, and I fell into this trap too of being like, oh shit, I should have never have said that, or I should have never asked this question because he
Oh
just stared
yeah.
at me. But like, what are those feelings of anxiety after dating that you either have experienced yourself, or like can
Yeah.
just help other women to make sure that, hey, this is anxiety, like we can work on
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. Well, one is literally just replaying every moment in your mind and like picking it apart. Like kind of what you said, like, why did I say that? Did I sound stupid? Did they like that response? Like,
Yeah.
did I react a certain way? Like all anything, any like kind of reenactment of the date in your mind. And you're just like picking it apart totally. Also another thing is like, do I text them? Are they gonna text
Oh,
me? Like, how long do I wait to respond? Like, all of that.
wow. I
Most
didn't
of
even
the
think
time
about those.
yeah, I mean, most of the time that is anxiety coming up, right?
Mm,
Because it's like, you probably had an experience in the past where it made you think, "Oh, I shouldn't show that I'm too available," or "I shouldn't," you know?
right. Like, I'm
So
too eager. Oh,
exactly,
don't send
exactly.
like, hey, I got home text, because he'll be like, I don't really care. Or does he really care? So what do I do?
Yep. Yeah. It's all
Oh
those
my gosh.
anxious thoughts coming up.
Yeah. And then I'm even thinking like, if the person's having, or if the lady's having like anxious thoughts after a date, it's hard to get to
Mhm.
sleep, or it's hard to not communicate with your friends about the date. Like it's just all those next like actions or
Yeah.
ways that physically you're unable to relax and decompress.
Yeah. And yeah, and that's why I always say like anxiety isn't just fixing your anxiety doesn't just help like your mindset. It changes your whole life, right? Because
Mm,
like you said, like when you're in that state, it's affecting everything else that you're doing. Like you said, maybe you can't fall asleep. Maybe you can't eat in the morning because like you're so tense and like your body is right like in that state of like shock or
right.
nervousness. So it affects so many different things.
Yeah, I could definitely, we could go on for so many of them, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
When you think about it too, like what is either a personal experience for you with dating anxiety that women that are listening could be like, oh yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. I would say I recently went on a Hinge date and um his name his name was Farrell, but I didn't know how to say his name. I didn't know if it was like Pharrell, Farrell. I didn't know like what he was gonna sound like, right? Like I had like a lot of unknown questions and I was just thinking like, what if I say his name wrong? Like what if I sound like an idiot? Like what if I offend him, right? Like
Mm.
these questions like that. And I did what I always do, at this point, like been doing this work for years, so it's pretty natural for me to just like recognize right away that, okay, these are anxious thoughts. Like, how do I calm myself down?
Mm.
Um, so I did some deep breaths. Again, I'll get into more like specific tips later, but I did some deep breaths. I recognized that these I could let go of these fears. Like I was gonna go on the date and it was gonna be 2 seconds of my life when I said his name or when like I had to deal with that. And I was really aware of the fact that it was going to pass. It wasn't something that was
Mm.
gonna like hold on to me for the entire night. Right? Like, and I knew that for a fact because I deal with anxiety all the time and I know how to deal with it and handle it and work through it. So that was definitely one experience. And let me tell you, that day did not go well. Like we were on totally different different playing fields, but um it was fine, right? Like I worked through it. I had dinner and drinks and we had an awkward like hug at the end. It was so weird, but I got in the car and instead of doing what I used to do with like, oh my God, like he thinks I'm a freak or like that was so bad. I audibly laughed in the
That is
car.
the best when you laugh after a date.
I
It's one of
laughed
my favorite
out
things I
loud.
used to do.
Yeah, I laughed out loud in the car and I was like, oh my gosh, what was that? But it was like so funny. I was kind of just like not like a game in a bad way, but I was just there and I was just like, I'm just gonna like take this for what it is, you know? And it was like a funny memory now.
Right. And it's also like you learned, okay, I mean, you already applied the lesson. Like,
Yeah.
I think that the one thing just in dating in general is that we get hung up on the hypothetical, like one mistake that we do somehow
Yeah.
in the date, and we can't let it go.
Yeah.
And that's the thing where I don't feel like women might see that as like part of being anxious. They just like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm a weird, crazy woman that holds on to this one moment. It's like, no, that's called
Yeah.
anxiety in the moment. Like,
Yeah.
like time
Yeah.
keeps, time keeps going and time keeps changing. So the only thing that is constant is change. So we get to move through those moments, just like you mentioned. And
Yeah.
until women have that awareness, like you're just saying, it's
Hmm.
constantly going to be there.
Yeah.
So now you shared one like recent one. What
Yeah.
about one that you might be able to share from a client's perspective without like saying their name?
Yeah. Um, to be honest, I haven't had a client that dealt with um like romantic relationship anxiety, but
Got
I
it.
did have one that dealt with a regular relationship.
Mm.
And it was a coworker. And it still absolutely applies to
Right.
the dating world and to people in relationships. And it was this idea where she was constantly nervous to go into work and constantly like thinking of it as other problems, like, oh, I just hate my commute, right? And like was very anxious about
Oh,
the commute. But at the end of the day, she wasn't anxious about the commute itself. She was anxious about getting to work to be with that coworker.
oh
And
no.
we really started to dive through it. And it ended up being that she has had past experiences that made her feel a certain way. And
Mm.
this coworker was reflecting things about herself back onto her.
Oh yeah,
And that's
mirror
what
work.
exactly. And that's what was causing a lot of this anxiety. And it's still something that she's working through, but it's something to be very aware of too when it comes to um not only anxiety but other emotions like being annoyed or being angry or being um those types of feelings like pissed off at someone. A lot of times it's like a trauma that has affected us and made us feel like we have to identify a certain way, a way that does not sound nice or pleasing. And
Mhm.
so when other people bring that up, bring that out of us, we're instantly triggered with anger or with anxiety or with uncomfortableness. And until we can recognize that, until we could get like super aware of the fact that, oh, I'm not angry at her, I'm being triggered, by something that I need to still work on and I need to work through, that's when you'll start to see a big difference in like these patterns that we were talking about.
Oh yeah. Mirror work is so important. I feel like a lot. I mean, I know that you and I both are in the space of like coaching, and we all have our own mirrors every single day. Like
Mhm.
I can speak for moments where I like to share this one of like when I go grocery shopping with Brad, and we both have hangry moments. And so when I see him be like, leave the ketchup, we're going. And I'm like, oh, he's really hangry. And like, I can see that without him knowing, like even expressing that he's hungry, but like, that's a
Yeah.
very basic mirror moment, because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, when I'm frustrated in this, he'll be like, do you need a Snickers as a joke?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
when you're in a relationship, you get to see these mirrors happen. And when you are open and vulnerable, you can communicate those, which is another part of anxious dating. Then when it goes into like anxiety in relationships, because it's a whole different level. And it's so nice that you shared another aspect,
Mhm.
because I don't think even we think about it as, oh, relationships are just romantic or
Yeah.
whatnot, and instead can be applied to so many different areas of our life and open us up to ways
Yeah.
to heal internally and work on our mindset. So
Yeah.
actually, before we get into any of the tips, like what are some of the mindset things that or topics that you discuss with your clients around anxiety?
Yeah, so a big one is this shift from victimhood to an empowered mindset. And a
Mm,
lot of people get triggered when they hear the word victim. They think, I'm not a victim. I don't act like a victim. Like, I don't tell people I'm a victim. But a lot of that victim mindset comes from our subconscious.
right.
And when we feel anxiety all the time, our subconsciously, we're looking for things in our life to support that belief that we're an anxious person. And it ends up putting us in this place of not being in control and giving
Mm,
our power away. And that's where this victim mindset comes from, where it's like, oh, I'm just anxious, so I can't do that. Or I'm anxious, so I'm not going to respond to them. Right. Like things like that. So, something I talk about a lot is shifting, recognizing first when you're in that place of victim mindset and how you could shift to an empowered one that makes you feel in control. For example, like maybe I am experiencing anxiety, but I can do this. I do have
mm,
control over this one thing. This is something that I can do, right? Like shifting from this place of like, I can't do that to, okay, well, I still can do other things. So that is a huge one.
awesome. I like how you even just described victimhood. Like you are correct. There's a lot of people that don't even like that word because they think of it
Yeah.
as something completely traumatic.
Yeah.
Not to like diss on anyone or like downplay trauma,
Yeah.
but I really appreciate you going through that part.
Mhm.
Now, even when you were saying like having control over one thing, it made me almost think of like how interrelated dating anxiety might be to like social anxiety.
Mhm.
Um, are there any examples or any like moments that you could even just like show how those are related, maybe either through your experience or a client that you had?
Yeah, well, I used to have a belief that I had an experience from my childhood that I could pinpoint like that.
Mm.
I just felt like very insecure about my intelligence. I felt
Ah,
dumb, I felt less than, and so it created anxiety in me for years after that. And so I started having major social anxiety because I always thought someone was going to ask me something that I didn't know the answer to,
ah,
or that I was going to
yes.
come off like an idiot, or that people were going to make fun of me. People are going to laugh at me because I said something weird. And um so I used to, even with my friends, I would get like nauseous before I'd hang
Oh,
out with my best
wow.
friends. Nauseous, like crazy. Um And I would, like, not tell people if I was gonna go to an event or not, like, I would wait till the last minute, my friends would get so mad at me, they're like, "You can't do this, like, this is like, you gotta decide, like, you're being rude," right? Like, and it was all coming from this anxiousness in me, from this idea that I'm gonna be humiliated,
Right.
right? Like, all like, from that experience. And so again, I would either not show up, or I would decide at the last minute, or I would show up and I would panic the whole time. The whole time,
Mm,
there would be conversations where I didn't even hear what was being said because I was just in my head and I was
right.
so tense and so uncomfortable and like, oh, someone's gonna say something and I'm gonna be so embarrassed, right? Like I just kept having that in my head.
Mm,
And the same thing goes for dating. Like a lot of people panic, like I said before, like what if I say something stupid? What if they don't like my job? What if they don't like this or that? Like what if they don't like the way that I respond? All of those things, and people just get so um tense in their body and so nervous. And I say body because the majority of the time we think it's all in our head, but a lot of anxiety is in our body. And that's what nervous system regulation is. It's showing your body that you are safe and that you are calm. And that's the most important thing to do when you're feeling anxious.
yeah, and that makes sense too. Like, we're going to get into the tips, and I've seen some of your
Yeah.
tips. I've actually done a few of them, but like, when I think about how I moved from being really anxious in my dating life, like, I'm going to just be honest, like I still sometimes say that I'm an introvert, but I'm an introvert until I get to know someone, and then I become extroverted because I'm allowed to, like, go through those anxious thoughts of, are they really going to like me as a friend? Are they really going to like me as a business partner? Are they really going to, even just like with your own clients, like
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, oh, are we really going to make a good match? Are they going to like me? Like those thoughts come and go all the time. And
Yeah.
when you get used to, regulating your system and working on your mindset, like those, like
Hmm.
obviously what you do goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
We can then come back, do the inner work, and become, aware and accept ourselves to then do the things. Like, I know we haven't touched on this yet, and I didn't even actually tell you I want to, but like the ugly self-care stuff.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where, like, yes, people probably are like, self-care is bubble baths. And I'm like, self-care can be a lot of things. Like it could
Yeah.
be, checking on your finances, and if you're,
Hmm.
meal planning, whatever.
Yeah.
So how do you work with clients, like with anxiety and just in general, on those like ugly self-care things that you like to do?
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of like how you explained it, like ugly self-care, I say that because I've seen so many Instagram accounts that are like aesthetically pleasing and just like beautiful, and these like girls and like their perfect matching sets and like self-care. Um, but what I discovered on my journey is like the moments where I felt like I worked through like the hardest parts of my life and had like major changes and major progress. I was like doing deep mindset work, like working through things from my past,
Mm,
things that were like ugly. I would be like sobbing. I would
right.
be like on my couch in like ugly clothes. Like I wouldn't be like dressed up in makeup and like, going to the spa or something. Like that deeper work requires um moments of vulnerability and uncomfortableness. And um something that I work a lot on with my clients, um, which ultimately is mindset work, is this idea of going back and thinking about your past experiences, because that's where the anxiety started. It started from a traumatic experience in your past that triggered this feeling in your body and triggered this belief of whatever it is, right? Like maybe for someone that is experiencing a lot of dating anxiety, it's like, I'm not good enough for anyone. Right.
Right.
And so something that I work on with my clients would be like, okay, when was the first experience that you could think of where you felt that way as a child? Like, first thing that comes to mind. And we'll go from there and kind of like reframe this belief and reframe this idea and acknowledge that things are different now. It's not the same experience as it was back then, right? And how can you show yourself that? Like what evidence do you have that it's different, right? Things like that we work on. And then the nervous system regulation is huge. So things like breath work, meditation, um, movement, and we'll get more into that in the tips. But um, that is huge because our um our anxiety is coming from this subconscious. And the way that we communicate with that is through our body, not our thoughts, which a lot of people don't realize. A lot of people think that they could just think their way out of anxiety,
Oh, yeah.
say a million affirmations, follow some positive Instagram accounts, things like that. And I'm not downplaying any of that. All of that is
Right.
helpful in supporting a good mindset and supporting a certain type of lifestyle, very important. But the way that you can actually change your belief system is through this nervous system regulation, which is all through subconscious body work,
And
movement.
that makes sense. I mean, it really does, because when I think of the times like in my past where I was told, just think a certain way or repeat the
Yeah.
affirmations. And the more I have become really interested in neuroscience, like, especially if we are really connected to someone, which is part of where our beliefs come from. Like, let's say if our parents told us like 5 times that we're stupid,
Mhm.
we are going to
Yeah.
believe that because it came from someone we loved, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to be a trigger, a trauma, or whatever you want to talk about it, how it grows as we grow up and whatnot. But
Mhm.
you can sit there and say affirmations of, I'm not stupid, I'm smart, I'm smart. And it takes so much longer. I think there was a study that said it takes almost 250 times, not only of saying the affirmation, but feeling it in your body as
Yeah.
true, to
Yeah.
make your body know that it's true and it's safe. And
Mhm.
so like doing the movements that you do helps like almost accelerate that process,
Yeah.
because it overrides, eventually will override this
Mhm.
mindset and those beliefs. So now that we're here, let's get into the tips that,
Yeah.
I mean, you have kind of already mentioned, but like, let's get into them.
Yeah. So one of them is breath work, and one of my favorite kinds of breath work is diaphragmatic breaths. So
Okay.
if you put your hand on your belly, when you do
Sure.
diaphragmatic breath, you're doing a deeper breath. So
Oh,
when you breathe in, your belly should expand.
I'm
And
doing it
then
right now.
when you breathe out, your hand should be pushing in. So it's a way to take deeper, longer breaths and get more oxygen into your body. And this calms your nervous system and essentially tells your body you are safe and
Mm.
you can be calm, right? Another one is a little bit more movement, either swaying, and you don't even have to move your feet for this, just like standing on the ground, flat-footed, swaying back and forth. Sometimes I will recommend my clients put their hand on their heart and like take deep breaths while they do it or give themselves a hug. And swaying is cool because it replicates being rocked as a baby.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but again, it's all these nervous system regulating practices. They all are telling your body you're safe, essentially the same purpose. But yeah, that one's pretty cool for that reason. Um, and another one that I love before a date actually is listening to calm music while you're in your
Oh,
room.
I
Um,
totally agree with that. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
like, I believe music for sure is a huge impact on our mindset and our emotions. So like,
mhm,
I haven't made a podcast episode about it, but like listening to music that are like, I hate this guy, men suck, or like crying music,
yeah,
I'm like, stay away from that. Go to more
yeah,
of an uplifting music, but
yeah,
still not like screw men. But like even just like you said, calming music,
yeah,
it's really empowering at the same time.
yeah.
Sorry, you keep going now. I just wanted to get
No,
this
no,
in.
I love that, and that's so true, and with that, humming too is actually another nervous system regulating practice,
Wow.
yeah, which a lot of people don't realize. I actually shared this the other day on my story. My grandma had Alzheimer's, dementia, she barely spoke, but she would hum
Oh,
all the time. And I remember my mom saying it's keeping her calm. It's keeping her in like a relaxed place. Like even
yeah.
though she might not know what's going on or she's not going to speak, right? Like she still was like self-regulating. And that was like so cool to recognize like after I've been doing all this work. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that. Like it's a lot of these are really easy practices that you don't have to take a lot of time out of your day to do, which is pretty cool.
That
Um,
before we go to the next
go
one, like when you said humming, like it reminds me, and now it kind of escaped my thought pattern here, but like when people meditate and do like Om, and you can
Yeah.
feel it vibrating through your
Yeah.
body. Like what
Yeah,
are,
it's the vibration.
yeah, but what's the other, do you remember what those are called? Like, is it mantras? What is it? Like there's certain types of ways of meditating. Like it's not just Om, there's so many other little ones where you can feel the difference.
Oh,
And like, I know that there's different frequencies. I know I'm totally
yeah.
like going blank here, but you know what I mean? Like there's
No,
different
I
frequencies
am
that people
too.
listen to. Okay, let's
I
move
know
on.
what you're talking about though.
All right,
Yeah.
you go back and tell me more tips.
Another one is shaking, like literally just shaking your body out. And something that I like to do is just like go like start at like just my hand, then like add an arm and then like just shake out your whole body. Um,
I used to do that before races. Like I would
really?
get nervous. So people, if they haven't listened to the podcast before, I used to be a competitive swimmer in college. And the only way I could get myself for not throwing up before a certain event was like literally shaking my arms and like jumping. And my coach was like,
Wow.
you need to stop exerting energy. And I'm like, I'm going to throw up. Like, I don't think you understand.
And
So
did you like realize what you were actually doing? Like,
not probably not, I mean, I had been doing it for a really long time. So
yeah.
probably not until actually, now that I think about it, I don't think I really had a grasp until I returned to swimming in my upper 30s competitively. I was like, what am I doing this for? Other times I'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm doing the movements to get my arms loosened up. And other times I'm like,
Yeah.
why am I frantically like shaking my entire body? And
Yeah.
people are looking at me like I'm crazy.
Yeah.
So
Because I ask that because a lot of times too, people will do these like practices, but not even realizing why they're doing them. And
yeah,
it's just like your body knows, like your body knows that it makes you feel safe. And so you're doing them, which
funny.
is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that
Um,
for sure is. Yes, keep going.
no, I'm trying to think. Another one is heel drops. If you just like go on your tippy toes and down again.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of movement. Um, simple
Like even
movement.
dancing, you would think?
Yep. Yep. Dancing, walking. Yeah, all of these things. And when people experience daily anxiety too, and this is something people could do um like before a date or whenever they're experiencing it in the moment. I always say start with like 10 minutes. Start with like two practices for 10 minutes. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be like this big thing you need to schedule. And a lot of times people are like, oh, well, where am I going to do this? You could do it in the bathroom. You could do it in your room. You could do it laying on your bed, right? Like make it simple, but it makes a big difference. And all of these scientifically proven to calm your body down, and in doing so releasing those anxious feelings that you feel like you're like stuck to in these moments.
Yeah, and that brings out a good point too. Like, so even if you're anxious in the date, you can be like, oh, I'm gonna go use the restroom. And you could like
Exactly.
hum or like shake your hands, be like, oh, they're
Yeah.
cold, they're freezing. I'm just gonna move things around.
Well, another one that I didn't mention is cold therapy, and
Oh
that is a
God, no.
perfect example. What?
I'm like, oh God, no.
No, again, doesn't have to be like crazy. This is something you could do on a date. Like you said, you go to the bathroom, you just run cold water on your wrist. That's it.
Okay.
Just do it for a little bit. That's a great one for a date if you're like, let me just go to the bathroom, calms you down a little bit.
Okay, that's good. I'm thinking of like plunging and I'm like, nope, that's
No,
not for me. I
that's like
can
the
barely
extreme
handle it.
version. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Marie, I loved all the things that you've shared today. Like there's so much, like I hope women either have paused this episode or decide that they're going to come back and take some notes. And I can't wait. Tell the ladies like where they can find you and any other information of what you have coming up.
Yeah. So I'm mainly on Instagram at the.empowered.millennial. And on TikTok, it's just at the Empowered Millennial. And then I'm also re-recording a masterclass that I recently hosted that went so well. The women on there loved it. So it's the strategies and stories behind the transformation that I've made. And it's basically stories and how I got to the place I am now from being at this point of having everyday anxiety. So I wanted to do this because a lot of people share, where they are now and the lifestyle that people want to live, but a lot of people can't relate and they think, oh, maybe they haven't had the lows that I've had though. So I
Right.
share a lot of the lows that I've experienced and how I've used them to get to this point, how I've used them as tools to bring me through this journey of self-healing and self-care. So I'm re-recording that and I am going to be sharing that with my audience soon. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, fantastic. And we're going to get all of Maria's information and put it in the show notes so that if for some reason you're driving and you were like, what is that again? Yes, the Empowered Millennial is where you can find her on Instagram with 2 dots between the and at the end of millennial or empowered, whatever.
Yep,
No.
yep.
Yeah.
No,
Okay,
you're
I did
right.
get it.
You got it.
So don't listen to me. It's in the show notes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Maria. I really hope you enjoyed your time here, and maybe we can do this again with something else with anxiety going forward. Who knows?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Reinventing the Arena podcast. If you loved this episode or even the podcast, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. It helps more ambitious women like yourself find this show and learn how to have a healthy relationship with themselves and a partner they love. Until next time, remember to believe in yourself, that you were meant for a better relationship, not only with fully knowing and loving yourself for who you are, but knowing that there's a man out there for you. You're not too picky. You're not too much. You are enough. And the right man knows this too. Have vacation on your mind? Yeah, me too. Catching some rays while having a little R&R is what I'm talking about. Some summer fun sounds great as long as it doesn't include the side effects from boozy beverages. You know, the headaches, the dehydration, the horrible night's sleep, the hangover, and whatever else may come your way. Instead, try one of my favorite alcohol replacements called Moment. It's a botanical water, either still or sparkling, with no artificial flavors, no caffeine, and no added sugar. Instead, they have refreshing fruit flavors, healthy botanicals, and adaptogens. Some of my favorite flavors include blueberry ginger, spiced mango, and blood orange. Plus, I find them refreshing while hanging out poolside, by the beach, or lounging at the lake. If you want to give them a try, use my promo code Reinventing the Arena at checkout for 15% off. The link is in the show notes.